brew crack, zibba dooba dooba, brew crack.
And we're recording. All right. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Brew Crack with Locker & Brewing Stores. We've got a pretty cool episode today, and one that I've been looking forward to for quite some time, and continuing with our theme of environmental sustainability and corporate social responsibility. We've got one of our fantastic friends from Crosby Hops here, Blake Crosby, and then who is now a recurring guest, James Lochran of Locker & Brewing Stores. And kind of the reason I'm really excited about this is we've got two guys here that have been tasked by their parents and their grandparents of maintaining a legacy of family farms, which is a huge responsibility, especially when you're looking from an environmental sustainability point of view. So it's going to be, I think we're going to jump into some good questions here and get a lot of good information. But first of all, Blake, all of our customers know Crosby Hops. There are customers that aren't ours that know Crosby Hops just based on reputation and how amazing the hops are. But I don't think a lot of people know Blake Crosby, the CEO of Crosby Hops, and the guy whose last name is on the box there. So if you just want to start just by telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the hop business, just take it from there.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, guys. It's a real honor, and this is going to be fun. I've been looking forward to it as well. It's not every day people ask me to do this, so it's interesting for me to be able to share the story, because I think sometimes living the story, you kind of lose track of kind of how unique it is and how special it is. And it's something we certainly value, the multi-generational aspect. So I guess starting there, my great-great-grandfather started in hops back in around 1900, actually came west to Oregon in the 1800s, but ultimately started growing hops in 1900. And the generations following that, of course, continued on with that legacy. And it was something that was always very special to the community here in the Willamette Valley, in the Yakima Valley as well, and later on in Idaho. So the Pacific Northwest being where 98% of the hops are grown in the U.S. is the heart of the U.S. hop industry. And of course, we're located in Oregon. So growing up, it was kind of just part of life, and it was something that I didn't really think much about because it was simply just normal life. As I got a bit older and went off to school, went to college, started meeting other people outside of my local community, I quickly realized that it wasn't maybe as typical or normal life. And in fact, I remember at one point in college, a friend of mine asking me, kind of bewildered and stunned that that my family could actually make a living, not only farming, but farming hops. It just seemed so strange to someone that had no background in that world. And to me, it was such a strange question, but it got me thinking, and something that kind of, I'd say from that moment forward, I started to realize that what we do is so unique and so special. And coming out of college, I realized that, and I always loved to farm, but it wasn't really ripe for opportunity for many years. The hop industry was very tough. It was largely an alpha business. It was largely a industrial brewer business, highly commoditized and very competitive. To this day, it's still competitive, but we've been able to get a little bit away from commoditization and actually create value in new and unique ways. And that's where my career kind of started formally. Obviously I worked on the farm growing up a lot since I was young, but always thought I'd probably end up doing something else. And thanks to the craft brewing industry here in the U.S., when I got out of college, that was energizing, and I was energized by it personally and professionally. And that started out real small, just working with some local brewers. Our hop farm at the time was actually smaller in scale relative to probably many of the others. My dad kind of did everything. We had some employees. We kind of formalized the business and took a big leap into the craft space and said, hey, we're going to go a whole new direction and get away from this commodity kind of hop business that we've all grown to kind of dislike. We loved growing hops, but we sure hated selling them on a commodity type basis to hop dealers, because it was more bad times and good times for most of my dad's career. In fact, I give him a lot of credit because, my career has been very exciting and full of energy and so many cool things around hops and beer. His career was sort of highlighted by a real challenging time for the industry. So, I really tip my hat to him because he was doing it before it was cool. My grandfather was doing it before it was cool. I kind of get some of the credit, of course, now because it's so cool and everyone wants to be a hop farmer and wants to be a brewer. People love craft beer. But it really is an acknowledgement to the people that came before me. And I think that's where it ties into continuing to be steward of this asset as we, continue to cultivate it into the future. Not to go too deep here, but fast forward 10 years, roughly from 2012, we put in a T90 pellet facility, and that really catapulted us into a new level, and we really built a whole new business, frankly. And that really became Crosby Hops and became much more than a farm. And the farm is still the roots of what we do. Very much culturally, we are farmers. We are also now hop merchants, hop processors, and doing that on an international scale with great folks like yourselves, and really pride ourselves on trying to be the best. And that's really our intention. And it's not so much about being the biggest, but it certainly is about being the best. And that includes top quality, customer service, hopefully the right shared values with our customers and our partners, and sustainability, like we're going to talk about today, is a big part of that too. So I could go on and on, but that's the quick summary of how I got here and where we're at today.
One thing you brought up there, and it's I find it interesting how your story kind of mimics a little bit of James's story and his move from producing feed barley to producing malting barley. Obviously, whenever you're producing a commodity product, there's very little that the farmer can actually do to add value to their product. I mean, your product is based upon the price of your product is based upon the market value of the product. What are some of the things? And well, let me back up. And from my point of view, as somebody who is environmentally conscious, it's the things that you can do to add value to your product that allow you the ability to put back into sustainable practices to increase the margin that you make on your product from a commodity product to a more desired product. What are some of the things, I'll jump in, I'll ask this to both of you guys. What are some of the things that you guys have done to add value to your product to be able to reinvest into the land that you grew up on?
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at that. For us, it really started with understanding the customer intimately, I think. And that journey started for me personally, probably back in 2008, 2009, as I was coming out of college, and I really got into craft beer. And I was fortunate that our farm is only about a half hour south of Portland, Oregon, AKA Beervana, which is one of the hot spots for craft beer in the United States. And so I had a unique advantage where I could really just literally drive up the road and speak to some of the best brewers in the world. And so that was pretty cool, and still is, and gave me a lot of inspiration. So understanding the needs of the customer and really approaching that with a unique desire to really put forth the best possible hop. And even at that time, not totally understanding what that even meant, because we were coming from, again, a real industrial kind of macro hop world. And now I'm working with artisan brewers and realizing that there's some different requirements. I didn't have a lot of exposure to breweries growing up. We always worked with a large hop dealer. There was always sort of a bit of a wall there, of course, between the growers and the brewers. If you would have asked me even 10 years ago, we were talking about this before we jumped on, but what total oil was exactly and why it mattered, I wouldn't be able to answer that question. Harvest timing was sort of something that was just done around convenience. It was nothing to do around customer expectations or desires. So it's funny thinking back, and I think a lot of farms have gone through this evolution with craft. But for me, first and foremost, is like intimately understanding the needs and the challenges our customers are facing, and then really kind of obsessively working to solve those problems and try to do it the best you possibly can, and use the unique advantages you may have in your area or in your relationships with other growers to find and source and even grow the best examples of those certain varieties. And so that's kind of where it all started, was like just that real focus on putting the best hop possible forward. And once we started doing that and creating value through quality, then we started to provide this platform that allowed for us to build on with sustainability, customer experience, customer service. Then it became a little more of a marketing thing around telling our story in a meaningful and impactful way that was authentic and true to who we are. And I think that comes through really strong in the brand, because it really is who we are. And so that started to create a lot of momentum, and that's something, that authenticity, that is valued by craft brewing, not so much previously valued by some of the large macro customers that we were working with. So all those things kind of have continued to combine and create a snowball effect and work synergistically, among many other things too. But those feel like some of the core tenets of what have allowed us to start creating additional value, besides just being a hop producer.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, it's been, craft beer has been wonderful for a lot of us in the raw material and the ingredient production sector, be it hops, in Blake's case, and barley in our case, because it has been a gift of an industry which has allowed us as farmers and growers and producers to get close to customers and talk to customers. Like, the sad thing is, most farmers in the world don't actually ever talk to their customers, be it dairy, beef, apple, grain, doesn't matter. Like, there's almost no interaction between the person growing the product and producing the product and the person consuming the product. So, and it all runs through middlemen and processors and people who have agendas or whatnot. So the person at the beginning of the chain very, very seldom gets the opportunity that we've had to talk to those customers, like you just said, like, and ask them what they want, and say, well, like, if I do X, is that of interest to you? And if it is, well, can we figure out a way to make that more commercially viable for all of us? And craft brewing has allowed that answer to be yes more often than not, and it's meant that farming families like Crosby's and Loughran's have been able to develop their farms and their businesses, I guess, in a way that, you know, if we kept doing what we were doing, certainly if we kept doing our farm and our soils and our land and our environment around us would be a lot more depleted and kind of mined, for want of a better way of putting it. Because when you're producing commodity grain, and I'm guessing the same for commodity hops, you know, you're just banging out volume for the lowest possible cost, trying to earn enough to put your kids through college and put food on the table, and you're not really got any surplus left to reinvest or to improve the facility, and very often barely even enough to maintain the environment that you're working with, unless you go to mega scale. And at that stage, the farming ethos becomes tainted in many ways. Anyway, so craft brewing is it's a wonderful industry or piece of the community to be involved in.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I wanted to hit on, that this industry that we're all a part of allows us to create that added value and gives us the opportunity to work directly with the actual end user of a product and show this is worth more money than a commodity product. And that increased revenue allows us to invest back in the land and the environment of which we grow product. But a big thing I wanted to touch on, Blake, and it's on there's a big circle with a capital B in the middle of it on every Crosby Hops box. And I don't think a lot of people know what a certified B corporation is. I know that's a big deal for you personally, and from a company standpoint. What is a B Corp, and what does that mean to you guys, and how does that help?
Yeah. Well, it certainly doesn't stand for Blake, and nor should it. And it's definitely a very special designation that we take pride in, but are also honored to be part of that community. And rewind 2016, 2015, 2016, started some early conversations around what it would look like to become a B Corp. There's a local grocery store chain here called New Seasons in the Portland area that always touted itself as the world's first B Corp certified grocer. And I shopped there, and I did then as I do now, and I always wondered what that meant. And so I started to dig a little deeper and realized that there were some other B Corps that I was familiar with in Portland, another one being Hopworks Urban Brewery. Then later I found out New Belgium, and started to think that there might be something to this. And it felt like it probably resonated with where I wanted to take the business. And ultimately, as we dug into that and with the team and several employees that were especially passionate about it, really helped me together walk through that journey. And it was definitely a walk before you run kind of thing. We certainly struggled. It took us a couple of years to get to the place where we could even be close to getting certified. And I think that was sort of the takeaway looking back, is that that's okay and that's to be expected. I think at first we were feeling kind of down on ourselves, but ultimately it really inspired us to do some things that not only make us a better business, but a better citizen, corporate citizen and individual citizens. And B Corp has continued to be a resource for that. So really, in a nutshell, and of course, these things can be Googled, and I encourage anyone that's interested to look up B Corp online. But it's really a more holistic sustainability certification that, of course, looks at environmental. That's important. But it's also looking at the people side of the business. It also looks at the governance side of the business. It's interested in how transparent you are with your employees around, say, dollars and cents, financials, bonuses. Is there a company bonus plan? Is there a profit sharing plan? These aren't necessarily all requirements, but these are the types of questions that come up in a B Corp assessment. Compensation and benefits, living wages. So there's a lot of data that has to be mined from the organization, and it takes quite a bit of work. It's a pretty big lift, and you do that every couple of years. The first certification, of course, is the biggest lift, and essentially collecting all this data and kind of census data too on diversity, demographic data, all these things that are becoming kind of front and center in today's conversations. B Corp has been talking about and thinking about now for quite a long time. And so looking back, it kind of feels like we were an early adopter now. At the time, it didn't necessarily feel that way, but we were the first hop organization, hop company in the world to get B Corp certified. And so at the time that meant a lot, but I think now that means more than ever, just given some of the challenges we've seen in our society the last couple of years. And the good news is we're seeing the B Corp movement spread at an accelerated rate. I think the conversations are becoming more mainstream, that probably used to feel a little more edgy. A lot of those conversations are feeling more mainstream, and a lot of businesses are more interested in things like B Corp, and customers are valuing that more as well. I will say, when we did it, the intention really wasn't to push a marketing agenda around it. It was really to build culture in the business. And I feel very strongly that strong culture, helps create strong businesses and ultimately good outcomes, both financially and for people and for the world. So it was really more of a play on, like, let's build a really strong culture here, because we were still in our kind of assembly stage of putting together this company. And we wanted to make sure we started off on the right foot and with the right values. And never actually knew if it would really resonate enough to be something that would create additional value for customers. And originally it really didn't. People thought it was kind of interesting and cool. No one really cared, though, to be honest, even 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Interestingly, though, today, it has probably in the last year become more of a talking point and differentiator, and something people are interested in more than ever before. And I think that's really cool. And I think it's a really good sign for where the world is going, especially in food and beverage, and something that I guess we want to continue to be a part of, and hopefully serve as an inspiration. I know another organization, Roy Farms. Congratulations to them. They just recently got certified. So they're the second hop company to get certified now. So really good people over there at Roy Farms, and just cool to see that momentum build around the B Corp certifications. So again, like many of these subjects, I could go on and on, but the key takeaway there is there's a big environmental component, but there's just as big of a people component that you're measured on, and ultimately you get a score. And B Corp really helps provide you feedback and the tools and lessons and education on how to continue to improve that score. So for us, it's a nice accountability tool for our business.
Yeah.
Is there anything, Blake, that you guys do now as the B Corp company that you wouldn't have done if you hadn't become certified?
Yeah, I think the environmental stuff, that's always been a little more natural for us. It's just more of a personal passion of mine, and just being in the outdoor world of farming. It's just, there's some low-hanging fruit there. The people side was something that I think we would have been slower to coming around to understanding how important that was, and some of the nuances there that are becoming ever more important. So I'd say some examples are like very, very early on in the business. We started providing health insurance for all of our employees, from all the way from the farm, down to the labor side, all the way through, of course, to the administrative and sales side of the business. And we did that back in, I think, 2015. So the company was still quite small, felt like a big lift, but it also seemed like the right thing to do. Frankly, aligned really well with this ethos of B Corp, and we really wanted to get certified, and that wasn't the only reason we did it, but it definitely provided an extra nudge and incentive and push. Also, we've incorporated some interesting incentive plans for employees, and we have a kind of a all company bonus plan. And every month, for instance, at our all hands meetings, we're reviewing those metrics as a whole company, and then those bonuses are calculated off those metrics. And there's a lot of companies do stuff like that, but again, back in 2015, 2016, as a small business, stuff like that didn't come intuitively to us. But that was kind of stuff that B Corp would ask about. Even our governance, we have a board of directors now. That's something B Corps are interested in. We definitely still have some work to do around diversity, and that's also something B Corp's interested in. But B Corp also provides us the framework and accountability to measure that and report on it. And I think the other thing just comes front of mind is probably just wages. I think we would have been, just the natural tendency we had, because we came out of a commodity environment, was we were always probably a little stingy, frankly, because you always kind of had to be, you felt like, to survive. And so B Corp challenged us on that, because we start calculating living wages, and you start looking at the data, and you can't really argue with the data sometimes. So we kind of just had to kind of take a leap of faith and just be like, all right, so here's where we want to be, the employer of choice. We want to be, an honorable certified B Corp, and we want to attract the best talent and retain them. This is where we need to be at. It feels high, but you know what? We just got to do it and trust that we're going to be able to make sense of it, and we're going to build a better business because of it, and a better brand. And that so far has worked. And it's something we're very proud of. I think we're certainly industry leading, especially on our farm. All of our employees have 3 weeks paid vacation, 401k with a 4% match, individual and family health, as well as really competitive wages. And I can certainly say with confidence, I don't know of any other hop farm that offers that in the country. So to me, that's part of what gives me some satisfaction in my job, is that people piece, and trying to make a difference in that world as well, which I think
at the start there was some of the environmental stuff that just kind of came naturally to you, because growing up in a rural agricultural environment, that's where your passion was. And I'm guessing I'm pretty sure that's something we share. What kind of things have you guys done from an environmental point of view and on the field and the ground?
Yeah, so I think as far as when we really started to get traction there was around 2010. and we started looking at the Salmon Safe certification, which is predominantly in the Northwest US. This is obviously there's a salmon country out here. We're kind of known for that. Salmon Safe isn't just necessarily all about salmon. It's really about protecting the watershed and being mindful of runoff and the challenges that can come with industrial agriculture naturally, and how do we mitigate that and those risks. So taking kind of a risk-based approach, which was actually new to me at the time of thinking of it that way. Salmon Safe kind of helped me get on that journey. And, we're doing a lot of things around cover cropping now. We have buffers, like very, very large buffer zones between production areas and waterways. We've done some restoration work. We have some natural riparian area on our farm. And then, some stuff that was mentioned too is, biodiversity piece. So Salmon Safe requires at least 5% of your area that you're farming be biodiversity. So rather than it just being hops or whatever the crop may be, that you're actually incorporating some biodiversity. So we have some natural advantages because of riparian habitat we have naturally, but we've also done a lot of work there to create new spaces for biodiversity. And we've done that across our different facilities and campuses, and we really got into the pollinator gardens. I find them to be beautiful, so it's kind of like a nice aesthetic. And then this is more recently, but we actually stumbled across our own beehive. So we have our own bees now. Maybe you've seen that on our Instagram, but we ended up with a beehive of awesome honeybees. And so that's kind of turned into a fun thing, and also kind of goes along with our biodiversity goal with Salmon Safe. But I'd say that kind of started us on that path. And then the other big piece with Salmon Safe is, they're really looking at agriculture and the chemistry. So what kind of products are you using to fight diseases and pests? And I learned a lot going through that, because we always just used whatever was labeled for hops, and because that's the law. You can use it if it's labeled. But with Salmon Safe, even if it's legal to use for hops, it doesn't necessarily mean it's Salmon Safe approved for hops, because they do pretty deep assessments on the different chemistries and look at which ones are more problematic for the watershed. So we have a whole list of things we don't use, even though we legally could, but we don't because of the Salmon Safe certification. So that's probably, if you were at our organization on any given day at the farm, that's probably the conversation you hear the most, because when we're applying different products during the growing season, we're always being very mindful that those things are all in accordance with the Salmon Safe guidelines. So that can be challenging because the list can be restrictive, but it's also forced us to get really creative and probably be better farmers. And again, it's kind of it's fun for us to kind of get to that level where it's like, okay, we can do this just as good, if not better, and we have less tools to do it with. So
I'm intrigued to know how those conversations went with your dad, because I'm guessing Kevin, you said, was kind of the field guy and the farm guy and looked after that kind of stuff. A bit like here, and like here's the kid coming along telling me, he's going to have to control mildew a completely different way. And, even though he's been doing it like this for 40 years and it's legal and everything's fine, and it's just not good enough anymore. And I'm just, those conversations, were they fun and enjoyable? Were they difficult and uncomfortable? Did it work through, or what was that like?
I'd say it was a little bit of both. So, at that time when I was having those conversations, I was only about 25, and, I wasn't running the business at that point, but I was very energized and excited, and I had a lot of passion, which I think I still do. And it's something that we just love what we do. And even at that age, I was very fired up by it. And I was really excited just by this idea that like we could do things differently. And I think it's also going to be better. And like no one else was really doing it. And to me, just kind of intuitively from a business standpoint, I was like, why don't we carve this new ground instead of always having to follow someone or let someone else go first? Why don't we go first? And to be fair, I think there was one or two other farms that were already Salmon Safe, but it was still very, very unknown. It was a very undiscovered kind of mindset, even at that point 10 years ago. So I was energized by that, because I just told him, I was like, you know how competitive it is, and this is something that can help us be better farmers. And also, I think it's going to help create the brand that we ultimately want to build, that is going to be a high value brand. And we can't create a high value brand if we just do what everyone else does. And so we have to take some risks. And he understood that logic. He's got a good mind for business, and he also, just as much as I wanted to, he wanted to break out of the mold. So he had to take some risk with me, and to his credit, he did do that. But there was definitely some bumpy roads there along the way, especially where, like you said, it's like, man, like we can't use that product now because of this certification. Really? Like, okay, like that's lame, you know? And it's kind of like, there's a little bit of that, and it's uncomfortable, but we just had to work through that.
And
but
same question.
Sorry, go ahead,
there, James. Because I know Anthony, your father, pretty well, and I know you've had some of those same conversations with Anthony. Same question to you. How did that go?
It's those conversations have been similar to Blake's, difficult in many ways, and I think it's kind of I think it happens in most family businesses when the younger generation comes along, and I think it happens particularly more in farming than in other businesses, because there is such a wide range of decisions made throughout the growing season. Whereas if a family business were to be, for example, a grocery store, the range of decisions is much smaller. Farming is you have a far broader range of decisions over a growing season, and then you go and you do it all over again. So I certainly had some difficult conversations, and I remember, coming up with a spray plan, and that was agreed, and then seeing empty cans that weren't on the spray can. I was like, where they come from? What were they used for?
Yeah.
So, and had those conversations, and from the older generation's point of view, I absolutely respect what they did, and there's no doubt about it. The 80s and 90s were brutal in agriculture, and those guys literally just survived. I think pretty much globally, anybody in commodity production, almost globally, struggled to get through the 80s especially, and they had to make every dollar, every pound stretch, and they couldn't afford to choose to use the more expensive chemistry to be more environmentally sound. They just didn't have it in it. So for them, for that generation to accept what we've been trying to do, what I've been trying to do, what Blake's been trying to do, and back us, and they come on us with this riskful journey. It's very, very brave and very, very impressive. But I did have an interesting conversation with a farming friend of mine a couple of weeks ago he's a little older than me. He's in his late 40s, and his son now is coming through. His son's like 22, and his son is full of these great ideas, and they're going to do this, and it's GPS control and section mapping, and it's blah blah blah. And he's like, can we not just do it the way we're doing it? And I laughed, and I said, you did it to your dad, I did it to my dad, and he's going to do it to you, and my son's going to do it to me, and that's just the way it goes. That's the part of the circle of life. So yeah, that's kind of how it went.
And you want that, right? I mean, I think even though my dad struggled with it at times, and it definitely created tension, and we had to work through that, I think if I asked him today, I'm certain he would say, I'd rather have someone that's challenging me, that's excited and passionate, even if I disagree with them. At least they're showing that they care, rather than someone that's just going through the motions. And so I think it's actually a real good sign, that the next generation, when they're challenging the status quo, I think that really bodes well for their success. Because if they're just wanting to go through the motions, they can get left behind pretty quick, because many others will be challenging the status quo.
Yeah,
because running any business can be a lonely journey, and especially when you're on your own, and if you're not challenged so much. So like when somebody else comes along who's passionate about your business and wants it to be better, and starts poking holes in the way you do things, it's uncomfortable, but it's one of those things that it's scary but thrilling, and at the same time, it's a good uncomfortableness, I think. And I'm guessing, and you know, that sentiment gets repeated, I think, when you hire great people as well, and they come on board and start joining the senior leadership team, and they start asking you awkward questions. I'm sure Pete's done it with you. I know Will's done it with me, and yeah, it's just part of the cycle. Yeah.
Well, so we've covered a lot of ground, and like the two big things that have jumped out at me so far is that as corporations we have social responsibility, and we've touched on two of those big areas so far. We've touched on environmental responsibility. We've touched on our responsibility to our employees. In my opinion, there is a third prong to that, and that's our responsibility to the community around us. That may tie both the environment and our responsibility to our employees together. But one thing I saw a couple of days ago, Blake, on the Crosby Hops Instagram is the Rock On Crafted Lager initiative you guys are jumping into to help support something that's very dear to me, and that's the music community. And like one thing I've seen consistently with Crosby Hops is the desire to give back to the community, be it the local community or be it the larger community, I guess. What are some of the things that you guys have done to either help out your local Woodburn, Oregon community, your Portland community, or the greater world community?
Yeah, so that's a big topic, and it's a good one because for us, as we've matured as a business, it's something that I'm extremely grateful that we're at a place now where we can start doing these things in a real meaningful way. We actually had an offsite a couple of weeks ago with the senior leadership team, and we're kind of asking ourselves some hard questions around purpose and what is Crosby's purpose. And we've kind of iterated on that over the years, but we came away with this idea around meaningful shared experiences and a lasting positive impact. And we've kind of been sitting on that now for a couple of weeks, and I keep coming back to it because it's really what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I think that's the question we all have to ask ourselves is, yeah, it's fun to hustle and sell hops. Yeah, it's great to plant more acres. Yeah, it's awesome to build a brand, and those things are all good. But is that really what's going to keep you going when things get tough, or when you have a bad day, or when things aren't always going well, like 2020, for instance? It's not always enough fuel in the tank. So I think a lot of companies and people are realizing you really have to get to that place where we all have a purpose in us, and it's really what makes us tick. And I think we're doing a better job of identifying that. And one way that manifests is with community oriented type stuff. The Rock On Crafted Lager, that one's a little bit selfish because I love music just as much as you probably do, Will, and I'm also a drummer, and I just am really, really excited about the bands that we're going to be working with. And that's one of the things I love about craft, is that symbiotic relationship since day one, since I got into the craft industry. The creative types, the artists, the nerds, whatever you want to call them, but like this culture is so unique and special, and it's also symbiotic with music. So with that experience, we're kind of putting our money where our mouth is, and we know a lot of our friends in bands and just people around the world that have really been impacted by COVID much more even than we have. Crew of bands, musicians themselves are really struggling. Obviously live shows went totally away, and a lot of people got creative, but still not the same. So we said, how could we pair our passion with a community that we hold near and dear to our hearts? So that beer is fun. We're donating 100% of the profits from the hops of any brewery that wants to get in on that, to Sweet Relief Musicians Fund, which was actually a connection to, I think, the drummer or something of System of a Down. If anyone remembers that band from a decade or two ago. Apparently there was
it's not that, lads. It's only a year or two ago. It's like 2 or 3 years old. Couldn't be that decade ago.
We're not getting old at all.
Not at all. Anyway, so Sweet Relief Musicians Fund was highly recommended as a really high quality nonprofit that supports musicians that are struggling. So so that's a fun one, and again, a little bit of a selfish one. But frankly, there's been a lot of other things we've done. We've done enough of these now that we finally kind of put a campaign around it called Green for Good. We sort of regard green as obviously the color of hops, as well as the colors of greenbacks, dollars and cents, right? And the idea of giving some of that back to the community. So we did some really cool stuff with the Michael Jackson Foundation a few months ago and raised nearly $20,000 for that cause with Garrett Oliver from Brooklyn Brewery. Really a big push for, underserved communities and trying to get like, how do we open craft beer up to a wider audience and much more diverse audience, which not only is the right thing to do, but even, if you look at it through the BCorp lens, which is like the right thing to do, and you can make a business case for that. Like craft beer shouldn't just be, right? That's not good for anybody. We want to grow this industry. We want to expand its consciousness. So that's exciting for us to be involved with that. We did some actually really cool stuff that's near and dear to my heart this month. May is National Brain Tumor Awareness Month. And the National Brain Tumor Society does a lot of fundraising this month. And so we did a walk and created a lot of fun there. Did some stuff at our Topwire Beer Garden, Topwire Hop project to kind of culminate that fundraising activity a few weeks ago. And I think we're going to be in a place where we contribute nearly $20,000 to that cause as well. So there's a lot of things, and we're going to continue to keep our foot on the gas here because we're at a point now in the business where I think just philosophically, we really feel strongly that we have an obligation to reinvest in the communities that have helped make us successful. And it's sort of that sort of life cycle idea. And it's not only about, retaining dollars for shareholders. And it's even not only about reinvesting it in our business, it's also about reinvesting it in the community. So that's a core tenet of BCorp. It's a core tenet of Crosby. And frankly, it's just something that we authentically get energized about. And I think people pick that up. And it's one of the reasons that people like doing business with us. And we're very transparent, as I know you guys are, that we're not always the cheapest game in town. We definitely try to be competitive. But we do really hold high standards for ourselves and for the business. And, we take the position that we have an obligation to make sure those dollars are really being used wisely, not only in our business, but outside of our business. So that's kind of a core philosophy that has evolved here at Crosby over the last 5 years.
And for me, like whenever we've got this whole larger conversation around corporate social responsibility, it's really all three of these things that have to come together to create sustainable businesses. Like if you just take the environmental aspect and ignore our communities and ignore our employees, then like we're not doing our jobs. If you take just and focus on our employees and forget the environment and forget the community, we're not doing our jobs as corporations. And like I love seeing what Crosby is doing and taking all three of these things and putting them together in a package to create a better company that treats its environment properly. It treats its employees as good as anybody out there, and like really is a member and a pillar of the community. Like I think, speaking for James and myself, that's what we try to do as well. And it's just fantastic to see. We're kind of running out of time. I think we've been talking for almost an hour now, but it's been an absolutely fantastic conversation. And thank you, Blake, for jumping on with us. But one thing I want to close out on, and I kind of opened the conversation with this, and that you both have inherited family farms, and along with that comes a lot of responsibility. We've touched on that a bit. Responsibility of trying to change things that have been done in the past to make them better, more efficient, and more sustainable. But like, I guess the ultimate responsibility is of inheriting a farm is the responsibility of hopefully that piece of land and that that farm's vision goes to somebody else one day. And what does that mean for both of you? What are you guys? How do you take that on board? And what are you doing, the both of you, to leave the land in a better place, and hopefully somebody takes it on and leaves it in a better place again?
You mean from like actual agronomic environmental practices? Like what are we doing on the ground?
It's a very open-ended, esoteric question. You can take that any direction you want to.
I suppose what we've done here is there have been some agronomic practices that we've been able to take on the field in the farm to try and just enhance that resource and environment of it. So whether it's stuff like tree planting programs, which you try and carry out every spring, as well as bird habitat, bat habitat, bee habitat creations that we did. And like Blake said, we've got some riparian strips as well along water courses that we've broadened out and maintained. But we've also had the opportunity to invest in the soil. So when we're producing commodity crops, it's very hard to kind of build up those resources. And during poor years and lean years, financial years, you tend to work down your soil reserves, your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium reserves tend to get worked down, and should be replaced every year. But in lean years, it's not always economically possible to do that. Since becoming part of the craft industry, we've been able to do that a lot more regularly, and pretty pleased to say that those P and K reserves are back to much more sustainable long-term levels, as well as their organic matter that we've been able to build up and incorporate in the soil rather than just kind of mining and extracting all the time. So that's kind of built it up to being an enterprise which is both environmentally and economically sustainable, because there's no point in being one without the other. You have to have both. But it is a great gift, and it is a great responsibility and a great burden to have that asset and that resource and be charged with passing it on in some degrees. And like, there is no farmer in the world who wants to be the one that fucks it up. Like, there is no farmer in the world who wants to be the one who doesn't who fails on that journey. I'm a father of two small kids. They're 6 and 8. I have no idea if they will have any interest in what we're doing. They're a little young to be drinking beer, but I hope that they do. But I think it's important as well that from a generational point of view, that whatever the next generation needs to want it. It can't be a burden. It can't be forced upon someone and told them that this is yours, you got to mind it and take care of it. They have to want it. So hopefully that occurs in our family, and it would be wonderful if it did. If it doesn't, we're just going to have to come up with a plan B. But yeah, it's so that's an added responsibility as a parent, where you're trying to guide a certain amount of interest without burdening that interest. So there's a bit of a tightrope there that I'm learning to walk, and probably will continue to learn to walk for forevermore. And yeah, those are the kind of steps that we're working through to try and carry on that multi-generational activity.
Yeah, I think that's all stuff that is critically important, and the environmental piece and the family piece. And I think just adding on to that, from our standpoint, a couple of things that we're doing to try to be better is we're actually zero waste compliant at Crosby. We're not certified zero waste yet, but we say compliant because it's a big lift and it takes a lot of practice. And it's something we've been working on for a few years now. But I have real deep personal concerns with the amount of waste and plastics and junk and garbage that is continuously being put into this world that we live in. I don't have all the answers there because it's a tough environmental challenge we're facing. I know a lot of us talk about CO2 emissions and warming of the climate change, whatever, but I have some deep concerns about that, and also about just junk and trash. And I feel like I see more of it around our area as time goes on. And so some things we're doing around that for me are just, maybe it's a little bit of self-therapy, just to feel like I don't think we're changing the world, but hopefully we're creating awareness. And I think that's important for future generations, because this thing with all this crap and plastic and litter that I see everywhere I go, it feels like I have now that I'm aware of it, I see it everywhere. And it's in ditches and waterways, and it all ends up in the ocean eventually. And I've done a lot of research on that, and it's just really bad. So that's kind of the negative side, but what we're doing is, on the positive side, is trying to do our part to buy less things that are plastic oriented, and also be zero waste compliant. I think the other thing, though, is the family piece, and that's the most critical thing, to make sure that we have sustainability to the next generations. We've had to do a lot of work in our family around family harmony and unity, and it's not an easy task to do a succession in any business, especially a longstanding family farm business. So we've done a lot of intentional work around that, and we've even worked with professionals to help facilitate a lot of that transition. So it takes a lot of work, and it's not just business dollars and cents, X's and O's, business strategy. It's a lot of emotional work and relationship work. And it's one thing that a lot of people, it's easy to struggle with that stuff. Many of us do, but it's also culturally in farming, it's not something traditionally that's been done very well. But we've really leaned into that, and credit to my parents for making that a priority, because it's created a lot smoother transition from my dad to myself, and certainly the way I want to continue to lead the business. If someday there's another family member after me that wants to take it on, or even if there isn't, even if it's a non-family member succession, it's hard for owners, founders, CEOs that are family oriented into the business. It's hard to let go of control, and I think I used to take that for granted, and thought, what's my dad's problem? Why can't he this is pretty simple, let's just do it, right? And I know that someday I'll probably have some of those same challenges. And it's just, I think it's, as long as we acknowledge that and make that a priority, I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that family businesses, and especially family farms, struggle with, as you're looking at generational sustainability and a good transition.
Yeah, well, that is, man, guys, I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed this episode. This has been absolutely amazing. And really, Blake, I want to thank you for taking time out of your Friday morning. And James, thank you for taking time out of your Friday evening, when I know you'd probably rather be home drinking a can there. So thank you guys for joining us. If nobody has anything else to add, I think that's all I've got prepared. That was fun.
I just want to say I was going to say thanks for having me, and just really appreciate the partnership and the community you guys are helping us build on the other side of the pond. And we feel like we're just scratching the surface together, and I'm just so excited about the future. I think there's a lot of good things to come, and we can continue to build our businesses together. And as BCorp would say, use them as a force for good.
And
yeah, thanks very much.